assignment for the quiz over multiplication, division, and simplifying rational expressions. The one thing I want to mention here is on some of the questions they will ask you to state excluded values, and so I want to do that before I simplify anything, because really the rules for simplifying: write as a fraction or write as a factored form and then see what you can reduce. So look at the denominator. What can we not use here? Well, x could not be equal to 0, and y could not be equal to 0, because that would make the whole thing 0, or therefore undefined. Okay? So for this one, to figure out what we couldn't use, I'm going to go ahead and factor it. I can take a 2x out, leaves me with x squared minus 2x minus 15. And then I want to go ahead and factor that. So whether you use Xbox, guess and check, 5 and 3 give me 15. If I make negative 5, positive 3. So by factoring, I also am able to find my excluded values. So x cannot be 0, 5, or negative 3. And that I'll also be able to use that later on. 25 minus x squared, I don't like the order of that, so I'm going to write that as negative 1 times x squared minus 25. X minus 5, x plus 5, more likely to be in that order, so x cannot be equal to 5 or negative 5. And notice the negative 1 doesn't change what those zeros are. So if it asks for excluded values, just do those first and then go ahead and reduce. Some of you are struggling a little bit with this one. I guess it's been a while. We already did problems like this. It's just a monomial over monomial. Reduce, get 8/9, and then it absorbs into the bigger power. So that's x to the third, that's y. You got it. Everything else we want to be able to factor. And I already factored this one. I'm going to cross out so you can just see what's left. Up here I'm going to take out a 4x squared. Leaves me with x plus 3. The one thing that I know is if I would add an x minus 3 here or an x minus 3 here, it's always worth double checking, because usually something's going to cancel out. So that cancels out. 4x squared over 2x times x minus 5. And I would just leave it in factored form. Don't multiply it back out. When we're solving, we want to be able to see that. On this one, I can take out a 3x, and it leaves me with x minus 5. Again, those cancel out. So I have 3x over negative 1 times x plus 5. So you could write it as 3x over negative x minus 5, or you could do negative 3x over x plus 5, doesn't matter. I'll do a multiplication one. So multiplication, my strategy for this, my method is just make this one big fraction that we're multiplying everything together, and then reduce it like you did back here. So change it back to what it is. If we were doing excluded values, and this one's not asking about that, but if you would factor this, which is 2x minus 3, 2x plus 3. Factor this, x minus 8, x minus 2, and my excluded values would be 3 halves, negative 3 halves, and 8 and 2. Those would be values we could not have. This is kind of getting you ready for when we graph these or solve anything here. Okay, so I have the denominator factor. I'm going to look at the numerator. I have a 2x, x minus 3, and I have 2x and x. 3 and 2 give me 6. Let's see if I can get it to work out that way. So I have a 3x and a 4x. So I want the negative with the 4 and the positive with the 3. If you do X method, then you need to stop, go over here, factor it out. Make sure you can get this. If you can't factor, you're not going to be able to pass. You'll not pass this test. Okay, so I got all this stuff factored out. Now I just need to cancel. So I'm going to cancel 2x plus 3's, x minus 2's, nothing left up here, nothing left down here, so 2x times x minus 3, 2x minus 3, x minus 8. Don't be tempted to try and cancel those. You can't do that. This is the final answer right there. Division is multiplication by the reciprocal, and then you just do the same thing you did before. So I flip 8x cubed 4x plus x squared. And then I do the same thing I did before, make a big fraction, parentheses, factor everything, and reduce. The last two are the trickiest. Just the only thing, this is the same problem as one of these, it's just the divide is not written here. So just make sure when you set this up, rewrite the numerator and multiply by the reciprocal. And then you just have your one big fraction. Go and factor everything and reduce. This little bugger, on the other hand, has a divide and a multiply. Well, if you think back to order of operations, you always see these problems on Facebook. People go, what's the real answer? Well, multiplication and division are the same level. So if there's multiplication and division, you go left to right. So I would just rewrite this. I'm going to factor while I rewrite this denominator here. Flip. Because we're dividing. And then rewrite as is. So we're going left to right, but we're just multiplying these together. You can combine them into one if you want, but really it's one big long fraction, factor fest. Factoring everything out of here. Let's go ahead and finish this one. So I could take a 9x squared out. Leaves me with x plus